Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? And hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would give my little fight review of the Tyson Fury versus, I believe his name is Arslan Makhmudov fight. I thought that I would kind of give my personal, review on that. And I do want to apologize because, of course, I did not end up posting my fight review. Or excuse me, not my fight review, but my fight prediction. I had a very long work week, overall, and I had to focus, unfortunately, on some other stuff. But that being stated, overall, for the next fight predictions, I will probably post it about a week in advance. That way, the most amount of people can see it. But of course, for those of you that did not end up seeing the fight, Tyson the Gypsy King Fury, was able to pull in another victory pretty much by complete and utter domination, or, pretty much overall by, outclassing that of a Makmanov, or a Makmanov, however you want to pronounce his name, the Russian fighter that, was looked at as a quote unquote amateur, great fighter. And of course, for those of you that remember when he was coming up, in professional boxing, you heard a little bit about him because he had a lot of amateur fights. I believe that he had over 200 amateur fights. He was someone that was going to be looked at as one of these next, decently great, up and coming, competitive Eastern European fighters, maybe like a Filip Hrgovic, and of course, another weight class outside the heavyweight division, Vasily Lomachenko, Gennady Golovkin, Alexander Usyk, yada, 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 yada. But the point overall is that it was very obvious early on against that of an Ajit Kabayel that he really was not going to be as great as what certain people had thought of, him originally. And then, of course, not too long ago, I believe he fought an Italian fighter, someone whose record is like 12-4 or something like that, who recently lost to Richard Torres, someone who I'm also not overtly impressed with in the heavyweight division. Makmanov has basically shown that, that he is not super adaptable, which they have stated, throughout a multitude of his fights. B, he's someone who is very, very limited in terms of his skill set. And C, someone overall that, certain people have also put the sentiment forward. Timothy Bradley, I believe, kind of did first, but Andre Ward and everybody on the panel also said it tonight. Let's see, he can maybe put a little bit more effort. Now, in my view, I thought that, Makhmanov, I thought that, he put a little bit more effort than, what most people would say. I just think that, to be quite honest with you, that he is just severely limited as a fighter. And when you have someone that is severely limited as a fighter, the effort may appear overall once again to be a little bit less because they're just not able to do as much. I remember overall once again remembering the Cotto versus Canelo fight, and I thought, why didn't Cotto throw this? Why didn't Cotto throw that? Because he was not able to do it against that of a Canelo Alvarez. Because Canelo had some tricks up his sleeve, and on top of that, he was bigger than Cotto to the point to where the combination of both things, Cotto just could not compete with it. And it's also, the same thing in many other fights. It's easy overall to say that, well, this guy needed to try harder and this guy needed to do this. But oftentimes when they're in the ring against a guy that is just a lot better than them or that can completely outclass them, you see them throw less and less because basically they realize that the more that they throw, the more that this guy is going to be able to counter them. And Tyson Fury, you can tell, is definitely not in his prime years anymore. He's definitely an older fighter. He's going to turn 38 years old, I believe, in August or something like that. He definitely is not at the top point in his career anymore, but he still is someone that I do truly believe is potentially still one of the top 5 best heavyweights in the world. If you were to put him in the ring against certain guys like Joseph Parker or, some of those other guys, maybe even a Wardley or, that of some of the other guys there and Ajit Kabayel, there's a very good possibility that I believe that Tyson Fury could defeat them. Now, would I favor him to beat all those guys? I'm not quite sure. I would favor him to probably beat Fabio Wardley and maybe Joseph Parker, but some of those other guys like Ajit Kabayel or Moses Itama, I'm not really quite sure because those guys would give Fury a very tough fight. They're both very athletically gifted. Kabayel is someone that has a very good chin. He's someone also that kind of comes in to pressure him the whole entire time. But after taking a look at his last fight, Fury may be able to have some success. Who knows? And Itama, we still don't know how good he is. Although in his last fight, I will state that he did look like he struggled a bit more than what I and what many people expected of him. But Tyson Fury, he showed what he always has been, in my personal view, which is someone that is a truly great heavyweight fighter. He is highly skilled for his size. Does that mean necessarily that he has no holes in his game? No, of course not. As Andre Ward and other fighters have mentioned in the past, sometimes Tyson Fury backs up in a straight line. You're supposed to move laterally, and Fury does know how to move laterally. It's just sometimes when he gets backed up, he does, move back in a straight line. He's always had a little bit of an issue with that, and you see this a lot with taller fighters. A lot of the times with taller fighters, including Tommy Hearns and Oscar De La Hoya, A, oftentimes they don't have the best head movement. B, they keep their hands down very low because they're a little bit quicker, and they can because they're so used to their opponents not having the same reach or the same height as them, so they can get away with certain shots or keeping their hands down within certain ranges that other fighters may not be able to do. We see that a lot with Sebastian Fundora. Sebastian Fundora ended up finally getting knocked out when a fighter was able to get within his range over that of a Brian Mendoza because he does not keep his hands up very well inside the range. There are certain fighters that do that, and Tyson Fury is able to adapt better than the average fighter like that, and he has amazing upper body movement for a guy of his size. He truly is someone that is very maneuverable for someone who apparently is about 6'9". He looked about 280 pounds again in this fight, to be quite honest with you. He looked even more flabby than what he did in his last fight against that of an Alexander Usyk, but he did look decently quick. He looked, pretty much like the same old boxer that I had always seen from him. It's just he does have a few faults. One of them being that he does need to keep his hands up a bit more. B, sometimes he'll pivot in a wrong direction or throw a punch and, switch foot positioning, and then try to back out of range and it'll get him caught. And C, he's someone that, to be quite honest with you, he definitely could attack the body a little bit more. Because Tyson Fury probably could have stopped this fight, had he really went to the body. But it's also very possible that, Tyson Fury was trying to conserve energy. I just think overall that going to the body would help mix it up a little bit more. And Tyson Fury is someone that can go to the body, but sometimes he does headhunt a little bit too much. I've seen this within a multitude of fights. But that being stated, overall, of course, the question is, where do both fighters really go from here? Well, as for Mr. Makmanov, or whatever his name is, I think that it's pretty obvious that it's about time for him to retire or think about possibly having another career. Now, this is only the third loss of his career, and it's to Tyson Fury, of course, but, at the end of the day, this guy very clearly is not meant for professional boxing. And this is why I say you cannot always rely on the fighter who has this amount of amateur fights. Now, sometimes it can be an indicator of someone, who is a great fighter, like Shakur Stevenson, Vasyl Lomachenko, Andre Ward. Those are all fighters that would eventually become great in the pros as well as the amateurs. Evander Holyfield, Muhammad Ali, guys like that, Dmitry Bivol, Artur Beterbiev, AJ Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder, all those guys were pretty, great in the amateurs. But that does not mean that every fighter that ends up leaving the amateurs is going to have the same career. Because this guy more than likely was used to plotting, and pretty much outpowering his opponents and was, probably going balls to the wall at least a little bit more within that of 3 rounds. But that is more of a point fighting system. So he more than likely was fighting fighters that he could probably bully around the ring to where he did not have to move as much and also where he did not have as much action. But it's very clear that he is not built for professional boxing because in professional boxing, there's a lot more time, there's a lot more variance, and there's a lot more nuance within that of boxing. Now, that being stated, am I claiming that all of amateur boxing, that, there's just no talent? No, of course not. And we know that the amateur system has developed some of the best talents ever, including Ali, including Ward, including that of Lomachenko, Alexander Usyk, Gennady Golovkin, Artur Beterbiev. There are some other fighters that I'm sure I'm forgetting, but there are also some other fighters that you can tell they come from the amateurs and they're expected to do big things in the pros. And you can just tell that they never learned certain things that they truly needed to learn. Like David Morrell, for example. Everyone thought that David Morrell was going to be this big, shit, for that of the light heavyweight division or the super middleweight division. And pretty much in the biggest fight of his career against that of a David Benavidez, although he gave him a little bit of a challenge, his skill set was pretty much massively exposed, which I said it was going to be. And then in his most recent fight against that one Russian fighter, a fight that he really should have lost, they gave him the decision because he was the A side. So, I mean, the thing overall is that, once again, this is another example. Even if you have all those amateur fights, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're always going to turn out great. Ivan Redkach is another example, and there are other examples that I'm sure I'm not thinking of at the moment. But I thought that Tyson Fury looked relatively great in this fight. I would give it about an A- to a B+. I thought that he looked very good. He did rarely get hit throughout the fight. I thought that it was a relatively entertaining fight. It was not the most entertaining fight because, in my view, if Tyson Fury really could have, pushed it a little bit more, he could have ended up probably stopping this dude, especially if he would have went to the body. Now, he did do a little bit of dirty boxing, and do, some body work on the inside. But if he would have did that jab, down to the body, that stabbing jab, or if he would have did a right hand down to the, body or something like that, uppercuts to the body, which he finally started, doing a little bit in the latter rounds, I think he probably would have had this guy stopped within about 7 rounds. Just my personal view. But, Fury is getting older. I think he's smart enough to realize that, and he knows that his days, are numbered. So at the end of the day, his next fight could potentially be against AJ Anthony Joshua or Alexander Usyk, at least in his mind, which is a huge money fight. So why risk it against a guy overall that pretty much is going to be looked at as a bum more than likely here in a few years? So I mean, it just is what it is. But that being stated, overall, very interesting performance. I thought that it was a very good performance by Fury. Was it the best of the best that I'd ever seen? No. And could he have probably stopped this guy? Yes, but I think that Fury was also trying to contain himself to a certain degree and was also, basically trying to conserve his stamina as well as not get, too comfortable out there. Because Tyson Fury at times, as Andre Ward said in the commentary booth, Tyson Fury sometimes has little mental lapses, where he just gets overconfident and then he'll get hit and possibly knocked down in the fight. It happened against Usyk. It happened against Wilder a couple times. It happened against Steve Cunningham. It happened several times in his career. But Fury at his absolute best is clearly an A-grade level talent. Is he at his absolute best anymore? No, he is not. But he's still someone that could potentially make a mark. The question is where does he go from here? As for, Arslanbek, Makhmudov, or, whatever his name is, that man needs to retire because there's going to be no real top contenders that man is going to be able to beat. And I thought that he showed a little bit more effort and heart than what the commentary booth was, kind of giving to him. But he still could have showed a lot more effort because he just barely threw throughout the whole entire fight. He basically had, 1 to 3 punches, and that was really about it. He has a little overhand right where he tries to trap you, in the corner. He might come up, overall to the body with a left hook, and he might have something else. He's a very limited fighter. He's not someone that is skilled really, that much. And on top of that, he's someone that, overall, as Timothy Bradley also stated, he needs to have his feet set, in order to be successful. And he's pretty much all about the power. That's pretty much what he is. So he pretty much needs to retire. As for Tyson Fury, I would be very interested to see an AJ Anthony Joshua fight. And of course, after the fight, Tyson Fury and they invited AJ into the ring. And AJ, to be quite honest with you, did not really look super hot about the idea. Now, what AJ claims it was about is that, overall, well, I fight on my own time and blah, blah, blah. And, I've tried to, do this and that, with you and blah, blah, blah. And who knows, maybe it could just be that AJ is truly getting tired of Tyson Fury's antics. I believe that they tried to make the fight once or twice. The first time it did not happen because of the Deontay Wilder trilogy. Then the second time, overall something else happened. So I can understand. But to be quite honest with you, it's just looking like AJ Anthony Joshua, like he doesn't really want to take the fight. And I don't know if AJ Anthony Joshua is truly concerned about fighting as much anymore as what he says he is. And, AJ, of course, is saying that, well, I fight on my own time. I do this. Is it really that, dude? Or are you just kind of scared to get in the ring with the Tyson the Gypsy King Fury? Because more than likely that Tyson Fury would probably embarrass you and outbox you because although AJ at his absolute best is an A-grade level fighter, even both of them at their absolute best, Tyson Fury more than likely, would probably embarrass that of an Anthony Joshua, So, I mean, it just is what it is. But, AJ's saying all this stuff about, well, I fight on my own time. There's no offense, but, whenever I hear a fighter usually say that, it's usually overall because they don't really want to fight that dude. Because I only ever usually hear that when it's finally, a fighter that they know could get them in big, big trouble. I hear Canelo, I heard Canelo do that with David Benavidez. I heard Floyd Mayweather do that with a couple of fighters. And I also heard AJ, of course, recently do that with Tyson Fury. So, I mean, it just is what it is. That being stated, it would be a very interesting fight. It's not a fight that I think overall would be the best of fights. I would like to see Fury maybe fight someone else because AJ, in my view, is definitely way past his best, especially ever since, his, past 4 fights. But, I mean, it is what it is. I would love to see Tyson Fury in the ring against a true, opponent, maybe someone like a Zhang. Although I think that probably would be a little bit too easy for Fury just because Zhang is a little bit too slow and someone overall that does have boxing ability, but he just wears out too soon. And I think that Fury, that, he would very clearly outbox him. So I'd like to see Fury against one of the top contenders. I'd like to see him against Caballero. I'd like to see him against Wardley. I'd like to see him against maybe a Danny Dubois. I'd like to see him against one of those guys. The AJ fight, of course, makes sense from a monetary perspective, from a financial perspective, if you want to claim that. But, in terms of the other cases, it's just, I don't know what it would really bring to a lot of people. It would kind of almost be like, the Mike Tyson versus Lennox Lewis fight when it came. Many people, of course, liked it, but it was a little too, too little too late, because Mike Tyson was not really at the same form anymore, and Lennox Lewis was pretty much at the peak of his powers. So they're just, although there was still a lot of interest, it kind of had died down at least a little bit. Same thing here. But that being stated, we'll see what happens. Anthony Joshua is coming off a pretty brutal loss to that of Danny Dubois. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but it would be very interesting. Personally, the fight that I would love to see is that I would love to see once again Tyson Fury, maybe versus that of a Wardley or someone else. But I think that Wardley and Usyk more than likely are going to fight next. So we'll see. But I would love to see Fury in another fight. It would be interesting, maybe even against that of a Moses Itama. But I doubt that that fight's going to happen. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. As for Mr. Makhmudov, or Makmanov, whatever his name is, that man overall needs to retire. That man overall is not that talented of a boxer. And as for Fury, it's going to be interesting to see who he fights next and if AJ is actually willing to take that challenge. But that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.